With this most recent PlayStation job listing doing the rounds that indicates PlayStation is going a more multi-platform route, a job listing I didn't need to see to know that this was clearly the path they were already heading down. The general dialogue and consensus I'm seeing now is that exclusive games do not matter anymore. And I couldn't disagree more. I just don't see where the supporting facts come from to support this argument. The conversation has turned from my system has more games to my platform is selling more games on your platform. And this isn't a video about the console war because I think it's very clear Xbox has clearly thrown in the towel, PlayStation has become the default home console and people buy a Switch for, well, the exclusives. I feel like all of these talking points are people holding on to the console war and conceding to market conditions. When Phil Spencer had originally said this,
we're not in the business of out-consoling Sony or out-consoling Nintendo. There isn't really a great solution or win for us. And I know that will upset a ton of people, but we are not in a position, and I see it out there, I see commentary that if you just build great games, everything would turn around. It's just not true that if we go off and build great games, all of a sudden you're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way.
Everyone called him insane, and rightfully so. They looked at him like a loser with a victim mentality, that there's just no hope for Xbox, there's nothing that they can do, which, by the way, is not the type of person you want running your company. But hey, I just checked his gamer tag and he's playing Halo or Skyrim, I don't know, but so, you know, he's a great guy, one of us. But now Xbox has fully bent the knee and PlayStation is looking to go in a similar direction. Now the conversation has shifted into, well, they used to matter. And I just think this is short-sighted, self-inflicted by poor decision making, and will have long-term impact. Xbox games are on everything because they bought too many studios, and they can no longer afford to keep things exclusive. It's too expensive. Before that, they put their games on PC so they could increase Game Pass subscriptions, a model they invented because their games and systems weren't selling. People drastically overestimate the "we have a console for you" statement. If Xbox had dropped a must-play exclusive game, people would have absolutely went out and bought the system. Let's not act like gamers aren't fickle and don't easily forgive and forget. Instead, they went into the generation with no first-party developers after relying so heavily on second-party during the whole 360 generation, and only had a bunch of washed up, past their prime sequels to games that nobody cared about anymore, games on their 5th installment. Halo 5, made by different developers, not the original devs. Gears 5, also made by different developers. Forza Motorsport 5, whilst PlayStation is either dropping reboots to beloved franchises, new IPs like Spider-Man, obviously not a new IP, but you get my point, and sequels only on their 2nd installment of revered games like The Last of Us 2, so of course you're going to lose. How can you say it's because we told you to buy an Xbox 360? You can't blame people going where their friends were this generation like you could on the 360. Nobody uses party chat anymore, everyone is in Discord, the games have gone crossplay. And look, I owned a 360 only because it had exclusives. I owned an Xbox One only because it had exclusives. I have never owned a Series X because it has no exclusives. Instead, I went to PC. When you look at Xbox when they were most successful, it is when they had exclusives during the first Xbox generation and then more so into the 2nd generation when they had multiple exclusives. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the system starts to fail when it no longer does. Now PlayStation is going multi-platform because their games are also too expensive, and there's this whole untapped crowd of people who will never buy a PS5, so why not feed them too? I mean, it makes sense, right? If you haven't bought a PS5 for God of War and Spider-Man this late into the generation, you're probably never going to. That's the argument. And I agree, there are people who will never buy a PS5, but there are also people who would now buy a PC instead of a PS5. And I do believe that this is a delayed effect that happens in the next generation and will only really have a huge major push when it is day and date. But with the gap between console and PC getting shorter and shorter every year, who knows how long before day and date is a reality, and it already is for live service games. You put your games on PC because your budgets are ballooning. You have multiple expensive live service failures and make bad acquisition decisions that don't make any sense for billions of dollars. PlayStation recently announced that the PS5 has shipped 2 million less consoles in the same time frame as the PS4. However, they're making more money. And people are taking this as some sort of win. And I know people are going to call me a doom and gloom merchant, but my response to that information is somewhere between that's not impressive and that's actually bad news. Because yes, of course, on paper you're making more money. With inflation taken into account, who knows how those numbers actually change. You do have to make it sound good for the investors, but I'm sure they legitimately are making more money this generation, all factors taken into account. But you have raised the price of everything you sell. Of course you're going to make more money. The games cost more money, the subscription service costs more money, the controllers cost more money, the console costs more money, and has continued to cost more money as the generation has gone on. So if you basically sell the same amount, but now you charge everyone more, of course you're going to make more money. My thing is, if your primary competitor has given up and completely fallen off a cliff, selling tens of millions less of their console, where did those people go? Did they go to PC? Have they just not upgraded? Why have they not upgraded? Do they not see a reason to upgrade? Have they gone over to PS5? And if they've gone over to PS5, why do the numbers not reflect that? Have the PS4 owners gone to PC now and they've not upgraded to PS5? If the Xbox gamers have gone to PlayStation and your numbers are the same, that means you have lost some of your audience along the way somehow. So I don't say this to say that PlayStation is a failing console or that the brand is in trouble. I think it's far from it. But I think the reason they aren't in trouble is because there is no competition. There is nowhere else to go as a console-only gamer. The only viable competition is PC. And to me, they are clearly losing market share to PC when they really shouldn't be. And I don't see why you throw Xbox a lifeline right now. Does it matter really? Putting your games over there? Probably not. They're already cooked. But is Helldivers 2 really going to move the needle on Xbox? I think that it could. People give the argument that the install base isn't very large and that their users aren't accustomed to buying games anymore. They just rely on Game Pass. And while those things are true, there's a certain excitement and novelty to the game going to Xbox. The same way Xbox games are selling really well on PS5 right now. The same way when PlayStation games first went to PC, they sold well. And suddenly after a while, they started to fall off a cliff because the people who didn't buy a system for your games aren't really interested in your games. And people's response to this is, well, if games aren't selling well on PC, then why does any of this really matter? Like, it's a non-factor if the games don't sell. And again, this is because the people who didn't buy your system to play your games are not interested in your games. The people who are interested in your games are the people on your system. So if you start putting your games on other systems, they no longer need to be on your system. All of a sudden, you lose that 30% cut on every game sold. The PlayStation Plus subscription, the money that comes in from accessories, microtransaction revenue, and it all snowballs into a declining ecosystem. And people may say, well, I'm exaggerating the effect of 2 million ships, but again, you have no competition. Why aren't you selling any more? On top of this, that 2 million shipped unit is highly inflated. This comes on the back of the tariff news where they just announced we shipped a whole bunch of PlayStations just so we could avoid tariffs and just have these PS5s waiting in the warehouses ready to sell at the regular price. So it's an inflated number. The Nintendo Switch 2 is currently the fastest selling console ever. How can you tell me exclusives no longer matter? But people seem to make this special exemption for Nintendo and say, well, their games sell so well that they only really make a difference for them. People clearly didn't go out and buy a Switch 2 for 3-year-old games that look worse and run worse. And the argument is that, that these games sell 30 million units. PlayStation only really sells about 8, so it's not the same. One Mario Kart game eclipses the entire sales of the whole Last of Us franchise combined. The Last of Us 1, Last of Us 2, Last of Us 1 remake, Last of Us 2 remake, Last of Us 1 and 2 combination remake. Yes, but just because Call of Duty outsells Battlefield games, you don't stop making Battlefield games. And also, you guys constantly compare console packing games to games that either don't have bundles or launch so late in the generation that the bundle really doesn't move the needle. When you buy a Switch and it comes with these first party games, they count as a sale. So of course Mario Kart is going to sell extremely well. Not saying that people that don't want a Switch don't want Mario Kart, they clearly do. But if this is the argument, then Horizon Zero Dawn, just Zero Dawn alone, not counting Forbidden West, has sold over 25 million units. Now, you have to take away 2.5 million from that for the PC sales, but still, that's roughly 22 million copies. 22 million copies of a brand new IP. Yes, fluffed up by a console bundle, but so are the rest of these other games. I think Horizon Zero Dawn is absolutely an industry plant game. But people love to run around bringing up selling 30 million, 40 million units for games that were tied in with the console. For every Zelda, Mario Kart, and Animal Crossing game, there's a Pikmin, there's a Princess Peach Showtime. These Nintendo games that don't sell like hotcakes, but they don't go and put those games on PC or PS5, Xbox. When the Wii U was failing, they didn't say, oh, it's time to throw in the towel, let's go everywhere. No. And I just don't understand how you can see a console that only lives and dies by its exclusives and say that, these don't matter anymore, and if they do, it's only for this system. Nintendo can afford to keep these games exclusive because they aren't making dumb decisions. They aren't spending huge amounts of money on every single game. They aren't forcing their single player developers to chase a trend. They aren't buying up the entire industry. They're focused on making games. So what should PlayStation do? Well, I have to say maybe unpopular. But if games are so expensive that you have no choice but to put them everywhere, you have to reduce the budget of the games. You have to make smaller games. I'm tired of all the bloat we get in games anyway nowadays. And I don't say this from a console war perspective. I believe that the console war is long over. If you're still talking about the console war, it's like you're those World War II Japanese soldiers. I say this from a perspective of someone who does care about the console system, and that is my favorite way to play. So the success and the sustainability is important to me. I look at Xbox and I don't want that for PlayStation. Yes, they're doing well, making millions of dollars after spending billions of dollars, by the way. Topping the PlayStation charts month in, month out with a lot of games that would have already been topping the PlayStation charts if they didn't get acquired, by the way. And yes, they have the best of both worlds. Game Pass subscriptions that are stagnant, by the way, and a la carte sales, but not at no expense. The Xbox console brand reputation is in the mud. People are saying that the next console will be their last if it doesn't do well. And with no exclusives, we have no reason to believe that it will do well. The Xbox handheld is going to flop because it has no exclusives. Phil Spencer needs to know that they aren't losing because they told people to buy an Xbox 360 and so everyone bought a PS4 and built up their digital library. No, for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, a new system is a fresh start. I don't mind starting all over again. I don't need to bring last generation's games with me. We have never been able to do that up until recently. That is a new thing. I buy a system for new games. If I wanted to play old games, they have a system for me. It's called the Xbox 360. But when you can't give people an exclusive or a reason to buy your system, they're just going to go to whatever is the popular product is. I mean, you didn't even give people a new controller, a new UI. And people say, well, PlayStation's doing just fine. They don't need exclusives. And that's true. They fumbled their way through this entire generation. There has been no must-play exclusive in my opinion. The live service initiative took a lot of developers off the board, and we'll only see one game or no game from them this entire generation. But the reason exclusives don't matter right now for PlayStation is because Xbox doesn't have any. So yes, the most popular console wins by default. If there's two stores that sell the exact same thing and they both have a few exclusives, and then all of a sudden one store completely stops selling exclusive items and the other store stops selling as many exclusive items, still some but not as many, people are just going to go to that store. Especially if that store is now cheaper, if that store is a more popular one, people are sheep. And again, I do feel like PlayStation is underperforming this generation, and they should be doing way better. They should be selling more. And I truly believe the second that day and date PC games come, which I do believe to be coming, that the tide will change. I say all this to say that nothing in the market has shown us that exclusivity does not matter. The only thing we've gotten is talking points from studio heads that clearly have no idea what they're doing. And that this new exclusives don't matter narrative is completely unjust. And also, I just want to give a quick clarification that I didn't want to put this at the front of the video because I didn't want to ruin the pacing, but I don't believe that job listing that PlayStation recently made confirms that everything is going to Xbox and Switch and PC. But I do believe it shows intent and a commitment to a path that they have already been heading down, which is a more third-party approach.